afternoon. Thank you for joining this live stream that is hosted by the Design Museum in Den Bosch. My name is Emmy Polkamp. I'm a member of the education team in the Design Museum. And this live stream is a collaboration with the master students of Design Academy. They are going to talk you through a few works of our exhibition. I'm now standing in this exhibition. The exhibition is from Victor Papanek, Politicus of Design, and the master students are of the Critical Inquiry Lab. And I would like to introduce Saskia van Stein. She is the teacher of the master student. And well, first of all, welcome in our exhibition. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about the collaboration between the students and our Design Museum and the exhibition where we stand in now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emmy. I'm just going to look at everybody at home, if that's okay. So my name is Saskia van Stein. I'm indeed headmaster of the Critical Inquiry Lab. And together with the students of the Contextual Design Department, we have designed a parallel program on invitation of the Design Museum. Now, maybe I backtrack a little bit. What is the Critical Inquiry Lab? It's one of the 5 masters at the Design Academy: information design, contextual design, social design, geodesign, and our small department, Critical Inquiry Lab. What do? We focus on artistic research, and we try to understand design research as design. Now, it might be a little bit, let's say, abstract, but I would say somebody like Papanek has built upon that legacy to try to see design as a vehicle to question the world around us. And when we were invited by the museum to look at this exhibition, the students have collaborated and come up with 3 themes. First of all, enabling. How does design enable people, for instance, that have bad hearing? Or how can we truly be empathic to a larger let's say, playing field for design than only the human, so incorporating maybe plants or trees into your design. The second conversation we have had was on decolonizing education, so which systems of belief are embedded in our educational systems and how do they relate to a broader understanding to move beyond, let's say, the Western perspective. And lastly, the event will focus around worlding. So which stories do we tell about how we want to shape society? Now, you might think that's a really, really large, let's say, assignment, but you could see that after the 20th century, design has been focusing more and more maybe to question systems around the design. So not only the object that you know, a chair, a car, a house. There, maybe you have the feeling this is designed, but there's so much more out there that we willingly or unwillingly shape. And let's say, I don't know if this is already a bit of an introduction. We have, I say we, but it's actually only the students. I've been a fly on the wall. And they wanted to, let's say, use this opportunity to scrutinize the work. I say scrutinize because when we think about criticality, it is not about an opinion. It is about questioning your own opinion and other assumptions and somehow try to come to a point of understanding. In this case, Papanek. Who was he? What did he mean in his day and age? And to me, he was more of a mythical figure than that he was a designer. But that's maybe already a provocation in and of itself.
Well, I'm curious what the students will think about that already. You answered already my question a little bit, but I'm curious, why do you think this is an important exhibition for your students to see, to reflect on?
Yeah. Well, I would say that each exhibition is important to reflect on, as is each window frame, as is each encounter you have. So I encourage our students to be open to your surroundings in the broadest sense in the world. And somebody who was very open to his surroundings was Papanek. And he, I would say, with his book, Designing for the Real World, made a very interesting proposition when it comes to questioning where do you want to play a role as a designer. And the students will highlight some of the things that they find interesting in this very rich oeuvre. This exhibition was, of course, conceived by Vitra and questions how a designer can contribute to, let's say, the togetherness, the social aspect of a society. And this exhibition is in 3 parts. We are here in, let's say, the oeuvre, really what the man made, and we are hinting on his role to education, then the product, and then we go to the contemporary part. Coming back to your question, I use these moments as creating a caring environment for the students to sharpen their ideas, but also touch upon the real world. So the culture of design, how does it work? How does it operate? So I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity given by the Design Museum for us to collaborate on questioning what do we see here. And I will say that there's been quite some heated debates about Mr. Papanek himself. And I'm hoping that they will, in fact, through the choices that they made, give you an insight on where are we now in the contemporary discourse surrounding design, but of course, where did he stand? It's trying to understand where he stood in his day and time and context through the eyes of today.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is a good introduction and a good start to go to the first student, and she will introduce herself. So we will go to her and visit her at the place where she's standing right now in the exhibition. So see you there.
Hi, I'm Jessica Jones. Thanks, Emmy, for introducing us, and Saskia for starting the whole exhibition, the whole little group trip around this exhibition on. I'm going to start with the big character poster, number 1, work chart for designers that Papanek created in, what year was this? In 69. And it basically starts with Papanek's ideal sort of scenarios in which to design, who you're designing for, and how to really break down the systems in which we're ending up designing and finding solutions for, and how we read the issues in which we're designing solutions for. And it's quite interesting as well because he starts definitely by pointing out that at some point in all of our lives, no matter when you're born through to when you die, you will at least experience one handicap at some point. Whether or not it's your baby, and physically you're completely incapable of doing anything pretty much other than be a baby, all the way through to when you're very, very old and geriatric, which is quite a hard word. So he designates who we should be considering overall as sort of recipients of design, and how do we see those people, and what are the potential issues that they may be facing. And then what do people essentially really need? And these are all obviously this is Papanek's opinion, and of at this point his many years of design experience and working in the design industry. He then goes on to sort of unpack the quite problematic issues that we are then sort of navigated to design, to at least receive in terms of design, like mass production. What do we feed into? What are the essential needs and the essential what he sort of would put in, the powers have taught us to need and what we would essentially need. So he talks about status and war and violence, and who teaches us these things, and how do these, what he calls false goals, how are the false goals achieved? And then how are they essentially, how are they presented, and how do they exhibit themselves? And one of them definitely is prison and unemployment, political exile, and all of that. And then he kind of comes up with a list of ideal potential changes to the system, and how, what are certain ways to access the changes in the system that would then sort of do social good over here. He also starts to create the ideal design team. And he calls it the minimal design team, where it really is not just about the designer looking at the recipient of their design, but it's also about including the recipient of the design as part of the design team, who will basically be benefiting from his design or the system that is being created. But he also considers that you have to really take into consideration so many different parts of society to essentially come up with successful design. And as we all know, he commented a lot on like mass production and the meaningfulness of the designs that we will receive in like general society. And what's really interesting is he like goes around in this incredible poster quoting many people. He quotes Oscar Wilde, all of us who lie in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. He kind of like tries to like position all parts of society through quotes. He tries to kind of bring in like how dreaming and how we can dream forward and sort of as a togetherness and as a whole body. Now, this sort of system that is here in this poster is really cool for designers, because it really is what we're taught on so many levels in sort of traditional design school systems, to really be part of a team and to really, to really sort of be all-inclusive in the way that we create designs, and to really consider all the issues at stake, which is really interesting. And that's something that, like, as a young designer who's still learning, I can really see my undergraduate degree in this poster, and it's amazing and incredible. And you really relate to having to break down every aspect of the work that you're doing and your design solution that you're putting forward. However, now, having moved a little bit further on in my studies, I'm finding it more interesting to be able to position myself more firmly as someone at stake in the minimal design team. Like, I really am the designer, and the designer has a voice, and the designer has the capability to really facilitate this design team, as opposed to just being the solution builder and just bringing the team together. It's a really interesting, a wonderful poster, and a great way to sort of start off with Papanek's ideal world in which he was helping to help designers develop, and young designers develop.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, well, actually, I was very curious what attracts you the most in this poster, but you already explained a lot of like your own similarities that you have as a designer now. But if you take a step back and watch the poster, what attracts you the most, or which element of this vision of Papanek immediately say something to you or attracts you?
Yeah, the immediate attraction to the poster for me particularly was how he was breaking down who we all are as humans. And obviously he's speaking from the very late 60s, so there are gaps in which, like, as designers today, we are not sort of coming to this point where we're including things. So for instance, the third world, you wouldn't just include the third world, you'd break it down into much larger groups that would then almost overshadow what's happening with the rest of the sort of the groups of people he's created. So I loved his ability to kind of he started finding who were the real people who actually needed design. So it's not only for people with handicaps. There's multiple ways to break that down. There are multiple ways to break down what means to design for a specific group. And then what also then really brought it in, there's a quote he brings in at the bottom, the member of the real client group, and who that client group really is. To really include that client group in the work that you're doing, and not just have an interview. They have to be like an integral part of the whole design process. Mm-hmm. And that was really what brought me here. Yes, it's a little bit outdated. We can update it now. I really think there's a lot of parts here. How the real goals are presented with all these different things. Like, specifically, it's very American centric. So obviously we have to take into consideration where Papanek was and where we are today, and where we're working as well. I think as someone who comes from the global South in South Africa, we really have to kind of you have to take into consideration where you as the designer come from as well, while considering this whole chart which he's created. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, maybe this could be a great start, or a map where we can build further on, our ideas that you have right now, and to actually really draw the map and make it bigger and give your own reflection on it. So
as Victor has beautifully positioned here,
yeah.
a really, really big one of that.
Yeah, there's a big one in the exhibition as well. Okay,
So,
well, thank you. Yeah. Shall we go to
I think we should move on to Eva Lotta, who's on the other side of the museum over there, who's going to introduce us to another side of Papanek, which he is interested in. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Eva Lotta Landskron. I am educated as a communications designer in Germany, and I'm of course part of the Critical Inquiry Lab. That's why I'm here today. And I'm happy to talk about Papanek's role in the feminist design movement and his position towards feminist movements in general. And in order to do so, I will talk about him as being head of the design school of Karl Arts in the 70s. And while he was head of the department, or of the school in general, he had a little fight. He had a fight with Sheila de Bretteville, I hope I pronounced that correct, who wanted to introduce a design department who was dedicated to only women. And this was called the Women's Design Program. And she was able to introduce this program and succeeded over Papanek. And they describe the starting point for the Women's Design Program as they respect women as beings with individual thoughts, feelings, and motivations. Liberation in part will come from thinking and working for ourselves and not accepting domination or interference from without. So while she tried to introduce a safe space for women to be able to talk about design in a safe environment, he described that as the ghettoization of women. And now we travel back 10 years. In the 1960s, where he was having a design show in TV. And for this design show, he created five drawings about the designer. He describes the designer as an artist, as using technologies, as a money saver for the client and for the people in general. But he also describes the designer as using psychology and in the drawing in order to look into the woman's head. And as a designer who appreciates nature, and for the nature he does not only draw a little butterfly, but like a woman just dressed in a bikini. Also another drawing of him is a Christmas card he and his wife sent out. And here we also see that he's sitting in a patriarchal manner, I would say, the woman standing behind the great man, also dressed very sexy, I would say. So what I question, or when I was going through the exhibition in general, there's like this huge gap or this disconnection between him being like proclaiming change and aiming for a progress in general in the design field, but still his perception of women not being part of the designer group, but being the appreciated nature. So when I was looking through the exhibition, I always had in mind a little bitter aftertaste where I tried to find myself within the role of design while he was excluding me from the very beginning.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, a big topic, right?
Yes.
Also for you as a woman.
Yeah.
Do you think? Yeah. Well, maybe I don't need to ask you this, but do you still think this is a relevant topic right now?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it already.
I mean, in general, I would say everything he touches here, even though he introduced those topics in the 60s and in the 70s, are still very relevant today, which also kind of leads me to question like what happened within the last 50 years when he introduced those topics in the 70s, and still we have to talk about it, which actually is kind of cynical in a way, and also sad when you go through the exhibition, and also when you see those works in the end who hope or aim for change, but still you have this very back of 50 years of design, and we still have to talk about this. It's kind of sad. Yeah,
it is. But we should talk about it, right?
And that's why we're here today.
I'm curious also. What do you think about this safe space for women, like designers, to talk about design? What do you think about creating such a place from the outside world? Like, how do you...
I mean, when we think about this ghettoization, this aspect of bringing the woman into one room where they can discuss about everything, what they think, but still not being able to talk with the men about the topics, it's something I would consider as a step in between somehow, which maybe was necessary in the 70s. Today, I would rather be a part of the big group and voice my opinion within many different gender. So, I think in those days, it was very necessary for the woman to be able to talk about these matters without being exposed to the male gaze, or like the males in particular. Also, on the poster over there are different positions of women describing the space as a very safe environment where they were able to create new ideas, being able to participate in discussions which were very empowering in a way. So I feel like this was very necessary, and this is also very necessary today, but I would aim for including everyone in a very big room and being able to discuss it there.
Okay. And what can your role as a designer be in this part?
I mean, I feel like in general, the role of designers or of people who aim to design is to create space for communication in a way, and to create space which empowers but also questions. It's a balance you have to find in a way, and I feel like one step for that is to be critical. That's good always, but it's also a way of being empathetic. No, emphasize. Empathic, yeah. Empathic. Oh, I'm so sorry. Of being empathic towards those who are maybe not in the very focus of media or in general. So it's finding balance between criticality and empathic. This is a hard word. And empathic relationships. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
So you think our designs will change our way of thinking also about it?
Well, I hope so. Yeah. But I feel like there's this huge, also Papanek talks about the role of the designers as the savior in a way. And I feel like this is very, that's a high goal, I would say. I wouldn't say that is possible, actually. But I think we are able to create spaces to talk, and we're able to build spaces which invite people in a way. So I feel like there's our role.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think now it's time to head over to Maxine, who's over there.
Hi, I'm Maxine Benvenuto. I'm a design researcher, and I'm also part of the Critical Inquiry Lab. And Eva Lotta just talked a bit about the conflict between Papanek and Sheila de Bretteville. And this piece that we have here actually was designed by Sheila de Bretteville. And I found it quite interesting because it's actually the flyer that served as advertisement for the School of Design back in 1970. And I'm just going to read very briefly what it says. It says that if the designer is to make a deliberate contribution to society, he, already a questionable use of the pronoun, must be able to integrate all he can learn about behaviors and resources, ecology and human needs. And she finishes by saying that taste and style just aren't enough. And what I find interesting is that already they started at that time to question the role that aesthetic plays in the design process by saying that taste and style are just not enough. And that's something that was a little bit later addressed by Willem Flusser, who was a philosopher, and who defined design as the practice of deceit, in the sense that it is something that keeps hiding things from us in the way we relate to the world. And this idea that design always commodify things and transform things into objects of commodities, that's something which is really part of the modern and colonial aspects of design. And of course, even though Papanek was a white male in the 60s, so obviously with a very patriarchal and colonialist point of view, it's interesting that already in such a piece and in the general discourse that we find in his work, that there is a small window that starts to open towards decoloniality and decolonizing design, in the sense that design can address more than the product itself. Nonetheless, what's quite interesting is that, like here, we have few elements that have been vacuumed into the flyer. And even though it seems that they try to go beyond the object, what we are left with are apparently raw materials, but in a way they are still commodities also. So we have here, for instance, a printed circuit. And even though the printed circuit is what is inside the object, or what is hidden from us by the shell of the object, it is really clear to us nowadays that this remains a design artifact. And especially in the contemporary manner, we are now becoming more and more aware of all the impact of the supply chain network. And so we know that a printed circuit like this comes at a cost. We have forced labor or very badly remunerated labor in Eastern Asia that is involved into the collection of minerals and into the manufacturing of this. But at that time, that was really the first step, to just say, like, behind the object there is a printed circuit. But nowadays we can start to create the connection between the printed circuits and the consequences of designing with a printed circuit. So that's something which I find really interesting, because it sorts, to me, it represents the moment when it started to open a window to what design is actually busy with nowadays. Yeah, I don't know if you have a question, Emmy.
Of course, I have questions. Well, are you agree with the statement that is written on the flyer? Pamphlet.
Of course, I agree that taste and style aren't enough, and I think that it's something that design has been busy with a lot, especially if you look at all the magazines or the press that we have in the design field. It still feels like, just glossy magazines with aesthetic representation of things, but there is a sort of wall that is hard to break, to go beyond that aesthetic. So I definitely agree with that. Then to agree if it's about behavior, resources, ecology, and human needs, I think that that's something that can be much more opened. Like design has sort of this capacity in connecting with a lot of different expertise in fields, which I think Papanek was the first one to start touching upon, maybe, with this idea of politics also. I think that's something that can be broadened much more. Yeah.
And if you look to yourself as a designer, can you get rid of the aesthetics yourself in your own work? How do you do that? Do you do that? And what is the role of aesthetics in your own work?
That's a
these
good
were
question.
already three questions.
Well, first of all, I don't know if I would still define myself as a designer.
Yeah, okay.
But I think it's hard in the way the field is shaped at the moment to fully go away from aesthetics, because even though as critical thinkers or researchers and so on, our work is still really bound to the field of design and to the events related to design, and therefore to an audience that comes and that is looking for things that they can connect with in an aesthetic manner. So And I think also maybe design has this capacity to create connection through reagencing informations or elements. And aesthetic, of course, plays a role in this. Then I think it's not necessarily the question of aesthetic, because aesthetic is extremely important even outside of the design field. But maybe the question of styles and trends is something that is more questionable.
Yeah,
I would say.
So
I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, I think it is an answer. We don't know Victor Papanek as the famous designer of his time, but I think he was more like an idea, like a kind of mental. How can I say
think the term that Saskia used before of this myth is quite representative.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a good one. Thank you, Saskia. Well, is this also the thing that you are afraid to call yourself a designer? The idea that we have of designers, or what is it that you're critical about that word in a way already?
I'm critical about it because I'm not sure if it is what I actually do as a practitioner. I see that my practice is evolving more and more towards criticism and maybe like more theoretical reflection.
But can it be also the role of a designer?
Then it depends what definition of design we have and with what definition we work. But there are so many of them, and yet there is also not one definition of design. So it sort of feels, we're a field where design has sort of agreed on being undefined for itself. And it comes with good points in the sense that it becomes this fluid practice where everyone can sort of find its own way. But it also comes with its negative points where when you start to try to position things, that becomes problematic. Like, what definition do you use and how do you position other designers or other practitioners from the field in your discourse? So yeah, it depends which definition we take,
right.
I guess.
So thank you. Shall we continue?
Thank you. Yeah, I think you can go towards Neil Jordan, who is the next one.
Yeah.
Hi, we just made the transition from Papanek's life and Papanek's design career to the space where several projects and objects are displayed, made from Papanek's design ideas, from his philosophy, by Papanek, by students of Papanek, and people worked in his philosophy. I'm Neil Jordan. And I'm also a part of the Critical Inquiry Lab, one of the students. And I just briefly want to address the mass production. Papanek is actually, there's one paradox in this exhibition that really caught my eye, and that's actually that Papanek wants to go against mass production, but also question mass production. But with his work, sometimes I had the feeling that his work became industrialized itself, which became trapped in this real world, how he calls it. And how I see the real world in Papanek's philosophy is more like the Western capitalist real world, which is thriving on the production of objects, of products. And as Maxine already mentions, is design is not anymore about products. It's also about designing systems, redesigning systems. So this paradox of Papanek wanting to go against mass production, but still with his way of working was applying to mass production, was very interesting to me. from a fashion and branding background, I became sort of conflicted within myself with the whole notion of fashion, the whole industry of fashion, and the branding behind it. And how can we use design or branding or a commercial way of looking towards design to make the world better, and then better in the sense of how can we go against this consumption economy and production economy. So in this room I see a lot of products standing around me, but is there also a designed system that is exhibited here? I didn't find it yet, but maybe that's something that still needs to be developed or asked for. So I don't know, Emmy, do you have a question for me in this on this point?
Yeah, what did you mean by the last sentence that you use, like a design system? Can you explain it a little bit more?
You mean the system of design?
Yeah.
Or, for me, I'm still defining design for myself, because I'm not from a design background. And for me, I have the feeling that there is some sort of like way how a design is perceived. For example, now we are talking about Papanek. This whole exhibition is about Papanek, but there are also a lot of other people involved in this exhibition. Students of Papanek, people that are working from the philosophy of Papanek. And why is that not, for example, in the title? Of course, you can't put all the names in the title, but design for me is not anymore about this one person, this one designer, but it's like a very big network of people together together working on a project, whether it is a theoretical piece, a written piece, an object, or a systematic trying to address a system that needs to be deconstructed.
Yeah, okay. So you, as a student, you don't need to achieve that goal of being that one designer that creates or design an object that is sold for a lot of money. What is your aim, actually?
Yeah, my aim is just to have the room to also give everyone involved together in the design of into the designing of something, to name them and to give them the space as well. And of course, sometimes it's necessary to have like a bigger name to attract people. But how can we redesign that way of thinking? And that's for me one of the biggest things to address within the studies, and also just how I can apply to that.
Yeah. Is this also something that you want to discover in your master, because you were already graduated from Design Academy and then you choose to do a master? Is this something to do with it?
I graduated from the Amsterdam Fashion Institute.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I'm having I'm now new actually in the design field. But I choose this master to address this conflicting feeling within myself between like telling stories, which was actually for me branding within a system, a fashion industry that's like the second biggest pollutive industry of the world, and how can I sort of try to have this sort of little influence in the behavior of people, how to consume. It's just a very big topics. Still don't know how to address them, but that's why I'm here. And also here in this exhibition to understand, for example, Papanek's philosophy. Do I agree with certain points? Do I don't agree with certain points? And then make my own story and make my own sort of channel it down towards my own perception, how design, what for me design is. So it's just a very big journey for me to define, but actually do we have to define? That's also a big question that's arising. Maybe, do you have more questions?
Well, did you find already some similarities between the work and the method of Papanek and you as an individual? Like an individual designer?
Not yet, I think.
Not yet?
No.
Okay. Well, and we need to make another round again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think the next person we are going to is Jennifer.
Yeah,
and
she's
she's the last one, and she's in the back of this space. So
let's go there.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I am part of the Critical Inquiry Lab. That's why I'm here. So I would like to introduce this very interesting work from Thomas Todes from 2009. This is the name. This is a work called Toaster Project, and this work has been selected as an analog to the advocates of Papanek that about design it yourself and also the nomadic furniture from the 70s. So why do I think this work is interesting? Because this video actually showing the whole 1 year experiment of Thomas, how he tried to replicate and reproduce a £399 toaster from a mass produced toaster. So it costed him around £1,119 to reproduce a £4 toaster, and this board actually showing the dismantle of another mass-produced toaster from the supermarket. So it actually raises questions of customer, user, as how we are disconnected with the everyday tools and product. They almost become part of our everyday life. For example, like toaster, electric shaver, hairdryer. It is hard to imagine that it doesn't exist in our life for over 1 week. We seldom questions about the mechanical, the structure, the design, the technique, even because they are so easy to access and they are and to use. They're easy to use, and also they produce with really cheap materials and cheap labor, which lower their cost. Imagine that the factory, the brand, actually still make profits from a £4 toaster. So how cheap would the materials and the technique and labor would be? And also the low cost of this product and easy access actually encourage the whole widely adoption of this product, and also encourage us to replace them and dispose them so easily.
Why do you think we need all those cheap objects around? Why is this a goal of us to have cheap objects around us and to make it like as cheap as possible, and we want it as quick as possible? Why do you think?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the whole history and context of the whole development of the techniques and also the mass produced product from the last century. I guess it getting more and more popular after the World War II. It actually encourage our everyday life. Encourage, like, assist our everyday life. And for example, like toaster, it is like essential for our breakfast routine. So it actually advanced our life in a lot of different sense, and that's why we get so used to that. And this also bring jobs and opportunity to factory, to workers, which encourage, which actually establishing another production cycle and the employment opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is maybe a big question, but what do you think that is necessary to change this way of thinking?
Mm-hmm. I think it is not easy to change, as maybe since our parents, our grandparents, maybe our parents, we get so used to all this product. Maybe I guess the starting point would be us to start to think about those extended parts of our life. For example, like even glasses or like your mobile phone. Start to think about how they produce and how why is it become essential for us today. That is important for us to questions and to maybe to observe more of our details around us every day, which would help to hopefully can help to change the whole disposal and mass production culture. Yeah.
And who do you think is more responsible for this? Like, is it a political question, or are we responsible as designers as well?
Mm-hmm. I think designer can designer or writer can actually create opportunities or experience or maybe produce a text to raise this kind of questions, to make people or people who didn't really give a thought of that to aware of this problem or of this whole phenomena. And also I do believe that user, actually all of us are the user, we should also observe more and to think more on the whole really low cost mass production product in our life.
Yeah. So if you have to measure it, is it a role of a political question, or are we even as responsible of the products that we are using?
I do believe every user do responsible to this whole culture, and because all the branded capitalists actually need our user to sustain their business, and also I believe this is promoted and with all different institutions or area in our life, like the businesses, for example, or even our government are encouraging this kind of smart city, smart life.
Well, okay, this is already a clear goal for the people that are watching this live stream. We want to end this live stream and take a moment. Actually, how we begin with Saskia van Stein and the students. So we see you there, and then we will end the live session as well. Well, okay, the students reflected on all the work. Saskia, how do you think they did it? What did you think about their ideas? And,
Well, they're standing behind me, so I don't have to be...
You cannot say that you did it.
I think that they voiced very well where we are at. So how to situate somebody like Papanek, who in and of itself might have had good ideas in his time, but it was his time. And if I reflect, it says a lot about, Jess was talking about how to understand your role as a designer in a force field. That's called the global culture that we live in at the moment. I think Evalotta very well stressed the fact that it's not about the male-dominant gaze, that it should actually really, that we should try to incorporate all the people, and I would nearly say humanize the humans again. Maxime questioned the idea of material culture and the way we convey the responsibilities we have as a designer, and Neil took us by the hand and reflecting a little bit, let's say maybe between the series and industrialization, and then Jennifer, of course, made an appeal to how to consume and how to question what we consume at the rate and the speed, and I would say it mirrors very well where we are at the contemporary condition, where, let's say, the global north has very, let's say, actively started to question are we imposing our worldview and maybe our way of standard living on the global south. And this is part of a discourse contemporary going on in education, but also in society at large, I would say. This has to deal with how to understand your singular position as a designer. And I would say the major shift is that the designer is no longer this genius, although I would say that Papanek had the idea of a sort of visionary position for the designer, but how to collaborate, both in and of and with yourself, with your surroundings, with the material you engage in, with the economies that you engage in, with the ecologies that you engage in. You see, I'm scaling up, because we have only one planet. So we need to critically question what do we do here, what we could be doing here. And yeah, I think they did very well. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Emmy. Thank you, Design Museum.
Yeah, and thank you for watching. Yeah, this is the end of the live stream. And see you next time.